from stale to sold, the emergency action plan for saving dying listings before you lose the client. That's the topic for today. I'm going to share my own case study for how I took an old expired listing and how I was able to get it sold over time. In a perfect world, we would have gotten it sold in the first weekend, but we don't live in a perfect world. And sometimes we have to play the long game to win. And so I'm going to share that specific case study. I have a pretty detailed checklist that those of you who have a stale listing could and should probably follow. Maybe not every last piece of it, but give you something that you can leave with today and execute on. And I also have something very exciting to share at the end, something that we'll be doing starting in a couple of weeks to help anyone who is interested get more listing appointments and take more listings this summer, really finish out the summer nice and strong. And so lots of good stuff that I'm excited to share for today. Let me start with this to get some engagement going. Whether you are watching the live stream or you're in the Zoom room live, can you drop a comment or in the chat if just like a Y or an N, do you have what you would consider a stale listing currently? Just let me know in the chat. We're getting a little bit of both there, some yeses, some nos. So I greatly appreciate all of that information. I would also like to say that I know in looking at who is in here with me, we have some veterans of the industry. Some of you that have lots of experience and have had lots of success over the years. And so two things with that. Number one, I will likely share things that you have heard before, but it's good to be reminded. I need to be reminded often. We sometimes, many times, can't see the forest through the trees. In other words, we in many cases don't take our own best feedback or learn lessons, right? So a lot of this may be reminders for you, but actually implementing it could be the difference between losing a client and making a sale and helping the client realize their goals and dreams, etc. No, that's number one. Number two, there is probably, I'm certain there will be some great ideas that you all have that I don't have on my checklist or on my list. And so please, if you have strategies or ideas or things that have helped you when you have a stale listing or a listing that just won't sell, it's stalled out for some reason or another. So please feel free to share those, whether it's as we're going through the checklist and my own experience or during the Q&A portion at the end, okay? So the document, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a document here that I will drop in the chat to find the right window. Too many windows open. Hold on. Here we go. Nope, that's the wrong one. Bear with me here. By the way, I'll edit this out in the post-production here. All right, now I've got the right window. Let me go back and share my screen. Sorry about that, everybody. Here we go. I'm going to drop this checklist in the chat for anyone who wants to follow along. And as I said, I'm going to bounce back and forth between the ideas in this checklist and how I actually implemented them with a listing recently that went from stalled out to under contract and closing in a couple of weeks. So for context, this listing, this is the one that I'm going to be talking about and using as the case study. This listing was an old expired, and like really old. I think he had originally listed the property in 2018 or 19. Okay, so this was an old expired. And if you need inspiration to play the long game or reminders of playing the long game, he responded to me in October, okay? October of 2024. That's when the conversation started and the engagement started. So he responded to a text message that I sent out to old expired listings. He called. He didn't even reply to the text. He just picked up and called me. We had a wonderful conversation. I think I was actually in Florida at the time with my oldest son, Caden. Had a great conversation. He let me know his past experience, etc. And he let me know what he was trying to do. He's trying to move to be closer to family in the Philadelphia area. And so we had a connection point there because his family lives near a town that my wife and I lived in for a short period of time. So we had a nice connection there, et cetera. And he shared that, look, I want to make this happen, but I'm in no hurry, right? I'm in no hurry. I'm thinking probably springtime, whatever. He also let me know that he had plans to make some updates and upgrades so that when the time is right, it was ready to go. So we had pretty regular communication, right? Because I made sure that I added the appropriate action plans for myself so that I didn't drop the ball on it. And eventually, finally, he was ready to go live on the market, okay? And mistake number one, I will readily admit, I think I priced it wrong to begin with. I think and this is a huge, to me, this would be a huge aha or reminder for all of you. Don't let your optimism or excitement get in the way of the data, because I think that's what happened for me. I was looking at comparable sales and what's available, et cetera. And also, let's face it, ultimately, the seller is going to decide what price, but our job is to try and convince them of the price. We landed at 575. Okay. We landed at 575. And that was problem one. And here's how I knew very quickly that we had priced it wrong. We didn't have very many showing requests the first weekend. And of the properties that I've sold recently, like I have several pending right now, and we have several that have closed over the last 4 to 6 weeks, all of those, besides this one, we had a lot of activity that very first weekend. A lot meaning it depends on the price range, et cetera. But I think we had 2 showing requests the first weekend, that was just not a great start. So immediately I'm thinking, poof, man, I messed up. And so here's the first big takeaway that at least that I think is useful for you. I immediately owned that. So the first thing that I would recommend all of you doing with all of your listings is every Tuesday sending them a very detailed personal update on their listing. I send mine every Tuesday, and it's a personal Loom video, okay? And that very first one, I said, David, I'm going to be honest. I think I may have made a mistake. I think we may have priced it wrong, given the amount of activity that we have, okay? And I started to plant the seed for a price reduction. I didn't even mention reducing the price. I just said, hey, I think we might have priced it wrong. And he got my video, and we had a lengthy conversation. And at that point, he told me, hey, look, even though you were excited and optimistic, I wasn't expecting you to sell it in a weekend. I don't need to sell urgently. So let's give it some time. Let's give it 3-4 weeks. And then we can talk about or explore a price reduction at that point. Okay. So the takeaway, though, is when you make a mistake, own it as fast as possible, or address what may be a concern as fast as possible, and potentially address it up front. I have a listing that's going live in 2 weeks, and their price, I don't agree with. I don't agree with it, but I tell my clients up front, I'm going to make a recommendation. It's your property. Ultimately, you have to decide on the price. And I know they need to sell, so I'm willing to take the listing, even though I think they're pricing it unrealistically, because I know that I can help them get it sold, and I'll walk them through the process of getting more realistic about that. Okay? You may agree or disagree. That's the approach that I'm taking there. The point, though, is in me agreeing to their price, I'm addressing up front, Sandy and John, this is your property. We've had this conversation. I just want to proactively address the fact that if we don't have activity the first week or two, we really need to chat about this price, because in this case, there's just nothing to justify their number. Now, part of it is there's nothing really comparable that is sold even within a 2-mile radius. So it's a little bit tricky there in pricing, but regardless. So be proactive, own your mistakes, right? And the sooner you do that, the more likely you are to get to the solution that you're chasing. Back to this specific listing. So we're at 570. I'm doing my weekly updates every Tuesday with him. And for those of you wondering, what I do for those is I do a personal Loom video. It is a screen share, and there are 3 things that I include every one, and sometimes other things. So the 3 things I always include is the analytics from homes.com, from my dashboard, the analytics from Zillow, meaning how many views, how many saves or favorites, whatever the case may be. And I summarize the activity and feedback that we've gotten that week. Okay. So in homes.com, so just for whatever it's for those of you who are curious and want the nitty gritty here. So I'll have these things open in different windows already. So I would have these open in different windows. I'd have the analytics pulled up, okay, which shows the activity here. I would have the same thing pulled up on Zillow, similar on Zillow. So I go to Zillow, I go to my agent hub, I go to listings, I pull up the listing, and really the only thing I'm looking for on Zillow is this, the views and the saves, okay? So I have that, and then the showings and any feedback that we may have gotten. So I'm summarizing all of that, and if there are any recommended action steps from that. Does that make sense? I don't know if anybody does anything similar. I've found that works for me. Now, the other thing that I might weave in is I have a listing that my only active listing right now, which I would quantify as stale, 48 days on market. That's pretty stale. I have begun presenting and pushing 2 of the iBuyer offers that are available with the iList platform, because I think they make a lot of sense given this scenario, given her situation. So the point is presenting other possible solutions with them. And the solutions at some point might be a price reduction, but there might be other solutions that you want to talk about. For example, what we did before a price reduction on the first listing that I had up here was we offered seller help for an acceptable offer. Okay. So he and I agreed on a number that we would offer in seller help for an acceptable offer that a buyer could use to either buy down their rate, whether it be short term, like a 2-1 buy down or even a 3-2-1 die down or whatever, or they might buy it permanently down, or at least a little bit, or they could use it towards closing costs. And this was a very simple Facebook post that I made. I just grabbed this screenshot to demonstrate what that looked like. We included this verbiage in the public remarks, in the agent remarks, and I'm bouncing around here, but this checklist, I'm gonna go and make more connection points. Just know that after the fact, you'll have this checklist. I'm also going to turn this video into an executive summary that for those that like to review in text, etc. So it went in the public remarks and the agent remarks on the MLS. We were proactively marketing it on Facebook and Instagram, Nextdoor, Google Business Profile, etc. And I sent out right here, reverse prospect email. I hope all of you are doing this with every one of your listings, that you're sending an email to all of the agents that have a client whose property who has search criteria that your listing meets. So we do that proactively every time we have a listing live, and also when we do things like this strategy here. So I then sent that as another communication to all of those agents that I have as reverse prospect, or that meet the reverse prospecting. What that looks like in your MLS might be different. I think most MLSs have that functionality, I would hope. I know Bright does, and I know many others do. If you don't, I don't know if there's some other way, or you can reach out to the MLS and find out. But anyway, that is one thing that we recommend everybody do here with this. So that's an example of that. And then I actually got this email from another agent in my market. This was a reverse prospecting email that I got on her listing with the same idea. She was offering $10K, or the seller was offering $10,000 in seller assist on a renovated 4-bedroom. And I just wanted to provide more sort of swipe copy for those that might be interested. Okay. So I'm going to unpack the rest of the story of this listing. And then I want to highlight here's what you should do today, as soon as we're done, if you have a stale listing, which a number of you said that you actively do have a stale listing. So I'm gonna come full circle on what we did to get this one sold, and then I want to go back and give you like, here's what you should do in this order. Okay. So we offered that incentive for an acceptable offer, 11,500 in seller help. We got a couple of showings. Okay. So at this point, we're like 30 days in, and we've had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 showings. And this is another point that isn't necessarily on the checklist, so I need to add. If you're getting minimal activity and you're not personally following up with every agent that has scheduled and shown your listing, you're not doing your job for your seller. Chase them down. And that's what I was doing. So I was able, for 2 reasons. Number one, you're doing your job to the best of your ability for your client. Number 2, you then have information that you can report back to the client. I'll just share some of the stories that came from these. Number 1, this was the first house that this client looked at. Their wife wasn't there. He liked it. He thought that her concern would be X, etc. Which, by the way, they then came back, looked at it a second time. The husband was right. The wife couldn't get over. It's got a backyard that's not ideal, okay, with this property, which I'll highlight another point of how we overcame that objection. That was one scenario. Another scenario was interested, but not at that price. Bring us an offer. He's open to offers. Get us something. And there was a little bit of everything in there, okay? But the takeaway there is get that feedback and don't accept. So the showing time feedback, I don't know about you, there's a couple of simple answers, and I do this myself when I show properties, if I'm being honest. Like, I'll just answer quickly because I'm getting a reminder every day to fill out the feedback for the property, and I'm busy, whatever, I fill that out. But in most cases, if you pry a little, you can get actual useful feedback that will help you in working with your client and doing your best job for your client, okay? Again, I want to reiterate, a lot of this stuff, most of you probably know. We just need to be reminded because we often get lost in our own minutia, let's say. Feedback. The feedback we were getting consistently was that the backyard is a problem, which he already knew, we already knew, but you're hearing it over and over. So a couple weeks into the listing, we used artificial intelligence to paint a picture of what the backyard might look like, okay? So taking lemons and turning it into lemonade. Now, one thing I didn't do, which I should do, but it's pending now. I should have added something about this being an AI rendering. Now, I did actually do that in the notes with the image. So in Bright MLS, when you upload an image, you can put notes that are public view notes. I did put that there, but I do think the image itself should have a little asterisk up here that this is an AI rendering, okay? And so just for context, let me see if I can find a
Right. You're right. MLS doesn't require that. Going back, hey, we were making the.
So this is what it looks like not rendered. And honestly, this picture doesn't tell the story of the backyard because it then just, it does really fall off. There's a bunch of woods and whatever, which doesn't really matter. The point is, we took the feedback and we looked at creative solutions for how we could address that in the buyer's mind. Okay. So we're going back and forth. We're going back and forth. Finally, we get to the point we're at like 5 weeks in, and David had told me up front, I don't really want to do a reduction until then. And quite honestly, the seller help was a reduction. It just wasn't a reduction in the price. At some point in our conversation, and it might have even been week 1 when because I wanted to proactively bring up the idea of reducing it as quickly as possible. Again, I didn't even talk about a reduction. I just said, I think I may have priced it wrong. And he threw out, and I don't know if this was like accidentally or whatever, he threw out that first, like the first conversation we had after going live, he threw out the idea of dropping it to 550. But he was like, but I don't even know, blah, blah, blah. But he threw out that number. So I had that number in my back pocket for weeks. We have the conversation. You want to move on. You want to get closer to your family. I think this number gets it done. Oh, squirrel. The one other thing I forgot, and so I'll add this to the checklist. The one other thing that And I don't always do this, but I should always do this. And I would recommend, and I'm saying this to myself, so I add it to my checklist. In your weekly update to the seller, also present to them their competition. So bring up what's available in the similar price range in their, like in this case, it was in the same school district. So here's what's available in this school district. And I was showing him 500 to 600,000 because even though that's a big swath, there wasn't a lot of inventory. So I needed to go that wide to have enough for it to be like relevant at all, the numbers. And I would not just show what was active, I would also show what just went pending. And I'm just playing reporter. I'm not making any judgments. This is what's happening. Okay. So since I went that aside, show analytics, like show activity, homes.com, Zillow, or wherever you want to pull that information from, summarize showings and feedback, and then the competition that we're competing against and what has happened with that competition over the last week. Okay. Now, pivoting back to this. So we reduced to 550, and I'll be honest, first 5 or 6 days, I'm like, are you kidding me? This isn't going to do it? Because we had 2 showing requests, maybe 1. When we reduced, I also sent another email, reverse prospecting. Hey, we just dropped the price, 25,000, sellers motivated, bring offers, etc. Finally, we get a couple of showings, we get an offer, we go back and forth. We're not under contract quite at 550, but it's very close. And that was a lot of work, if I'm being honest. And also, we get paid very handsomely for what we do. So I'm happy to do it. And I'm sure many of you would be too, if you knew or had confidence that if you put in the work and these steps and implemented what's in this checklist, that it would lead to an agreement. Okay. Now, one other thing that I did that I'm going to, because now I'm going to pivot to the checklist and what I think are the lowest hanging fruit if you currently have a stale listing, is the agents that had clients that at least expressed some warm interest, is we reverse offered them in the sense that before we did made the offer of the seller help and before we dropped to 550, I gave them a chance to offer and told them that this was coming. Okay. So that's one way of using the reverse offer strategy, is going back to anyone that has expressed any level of interest. Now, the ones that are like, my client they're definitely not interested, it's probably a waste of time. But anywhere they were like, they might be, they're just starting the home search, this, that, and the other thing. Going back to them before you make any of these changes and just say, hey, look, we're talking about a price reduction. This is what he is looking for. And he'd like to give your client 24 hours before we make this change publicly. If your client would like to lock it up before we do that, and it opens it up to a new pool. Because the 575 to 550, the agreement we have, their max price is 550. They didn't even see the property at 570. To them, it didn't exist, right? It wasn't even an option. And that's a lot of times with these price bracketing and so forth, what can happen. Okay. All right. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to share what I think is the low hanging fruit. Do this and this. And then I want to open it up for Q&A. I think we have some questions as well. And I'm going to start with something that may seem so simple and rudimentary. And I guarantee you this makes a huge difference. These images, if I had to bet, I would bet that many of you here are making a huge mistake with what I call the 5-pack, because it's a pack of 5 images that the consumer can see. And the mistake is not telling the story of the house with those images. I won't share the name or the listing, but an agent, he might even be live here. He had reached out to me earlier in the week. I got a stale listing right now. I need help. I said, shoot me the address. I'll see if there's anything like that jumps out to me that's obvious as to what may be problematic. And so the first thing I pulled it up on Zillow, and I looked at the image, the 5-pack of images, and I looked at the activity. The views were really low. The saves were really low. And the images were like, it was a wonky picture of the front of the community, like the marquee of the community. It was two interior pictures of essentially the same room and two exterior pictures that were just like two different angles of the property. It in no way, shape, or form was like telling a story. Okay. So I think like it's a little thing that can make a huge difference from this standpoint. These portals, let's face it, what we think about them, what we think about Zillow or homes.com or realtor.com is irrelevant. The consumer is using those portals in their home search. And these portals use algorithmic information just like social media platforms do. And if your listing gets more clicks, they will show your listing more. And it becomes like this self-perpetuating thing because the more eyeballs you get, the more likely you are to get showing requests. The more showings you have, the more likely you are to get offers. So this is something that you should obsess over with your listings, that you are presenting the property in the best light possible and maximizing the opportunity to tell a story and get people clicking to look for more information and detail, okay? I know it seems simple, but I'm telling you, if we pulled up 10 listings on Zillow right now, we might even do this during the Q&A, most agents are not doing this. They've got 3 exterior pictures and maybe 1 interior picture. And in some cases, they're all exterior pictures. So that would be, first and foremost, is I would look at your listing through the consumer's eyes and maybe get actual consumers' feedback. Go to your significant other. Hey, what do you think about the way these images are portraying this listing? Okay. And at least for me, the way you edit the 5-pack is you just go into the bright and you rearrange what pictures are shown. You rearrange. It's some portals, I think, show like even homes.com right here. I think it's essentially previewing 7. So that first 7 I would think very strategically about the first 5 to 7 pictures. And what story am I telling about this listing in those pictures? I guess is the long and the short. Okay.
Jay has a listing to look at if you got time.
All right. Yeah, let's do it. Who does?
Shay.
My man.
It's a townhouse and the outside is not great. And this is the one that is sticking around for me far too long. I guess it's only 3 minutes, but they should already be sold.
Okay. So okay. I don't think you're doing a terrible job here with telling the story. I think here's what immediately jumps out to me. I don't know what the kitchen looks like. That might be
That's
a deal
good
breaker.
thing. It's a very skinny island. It's a very skinny island.
So strategically, that might make sense.
Yeah.
I'm splitting hairs here, but I would probably have one of these images up here.
Okay.
And I would go exterior, interior, and then exterior again. Because here's what the front looks, here's what the inside looks, and here's what the outside looks again. I think you're very smart to have this, right? The outdoor entertaining picture portrayed there. I don't think this is terrible.
I'm happy that I pull it apart, man, because this one has been sitting and I don't love it. We're 3 weeks on the market and this should have been a 10-day listing.
I might, like this one to me, might be the second picture to show.
Okay.
Maybe. And I see what you're saying about this kitchen, but I don't know. I might own it. Like it's bright. It's modern in that it's got the grays and the whites and so forth. So I don't know. I might lean in. If what you might try is exterior, one of these kitchen, and then your exterior photos. It might be worth a try.
Hey, if you want a different result, you have to go a different route. So I'm for making those adjustments.
And the nice thing is like you can get pretty quick feedback. And now you might be guessing, but if you make that change, it's Wednesday, you make that change now, the portals will all pick it up before the end of the day. And then you see what happens on Thursday. And then you go back in your analytics on homes.com, for example, and you look at what does this Friday morning, I look, okay, how many visitors did we get this Thursday versus Thursday a week ago? Because Thursday is usually where you see the spike, Thursday and Friday, or at least that's where it tends to trend up. I'm pretty sure I'm not making a liar of myself there because this is the 28th. That was Thursday or Friday. So that's usually where you'll see the spike. So you can then like actually use real world data to determine, did that make a difference or not? And listen, we're talking about one thing, but you might as well do everything you can to stack the deck in your favor. And that strategy, it costs you $0, like zero. I'm not even going to say the obvious thing, which I'm going to say it and not saying, but I still can't believe how many agents have awful pictures. I don't care what the price of the listing is. When you have awful pictures, that's your brand. Your name is with the listing. I'm selling a property. I just got the listing docs back. She bought this property a few months ago, not with me. Okay. She replied to a Facebook ad. She already had a buyer agency agreement with someone else, but she reached out to me. She wanted help, etc. And I was helpful for her or to her, right? I was trying to help her. I said, listen, I know you have this. And quite honestly, some of what the buyer agent was telling her was either not true or at least slightly inaccurate. So I was helping her. She buys this house, immediately realizes she hates it. She has really bad allergies and she feels like the house is making her sick and blah, blah, blah. Weeks after she buys it, she's already talking to me about reselling it. Okay. And the problem is, can she sell it, pay me and not lose money? That's her dilemma. And one of the things that has me confident that we can is the pictures were terrible when it was listed before. Terrible. They were dull. They were just terrible. And so I know that at least from that perspective, I can paint this property in a much better light than what it was previously. Now, she also did some work to it because she tried to make it work for her. Like she cleaned it out a bunch, she ripped out a bunch of things, whatever. So I think I can also explain what she did to push the value, but I just know that we'll get more exposure. And the more exposure we get, the more showing requests we'll get. And the more showing requests we get, I think I can make it happen for her. So back to this document and what's the lowest hanging fruit. So number one, look at your 5-pack or the 7-pack on homes.com. Is there an opportunity to better present or paint the story of that house? Okay. And I'm going to say the obvious, highlight the cool things about it, right? If it's got an awesome backyard for entertaining, I would make that the second picture probably. Lean on what is great about the house. Okay. The description. Many of us now are using AI to craft our descriptions, whether it's ChatGPT or something else. Read your description. Is it too AI-ish, right? Does it sound like a bot wrote it? That's a simple thing and it might be silly, but I think there's something to it, right? When the consumer, and let's face it, some consumers will read those descriptions, some absolutely will not. They'll look at the pictures, they'll look at the price, and that's how they decide whether or not they want their agent to schedule a time. But some, the analytical types, they're going to read every last thing about the property. And so they're going to go fine-tune detail. And you don't want anything to give them a red flag or whatever. Other details about the property. If you've attended any of these, you know that I do my best to be as transparent as possible whenever possible. That listing that I have that is still stale, that isn't selling, the details of it, I don't know how I missed this, but when the listing went live, they were jacked up. I want to say that it had it was saying that the property had 0 beds, 0 bath, and 0 square footage or something crazy. I don't know how I missed it. I don't know how I screwed it up. I was busy. I think that was whatever. I can make any excuse, but it happened, right? So go back and make sure that the details about the property are accurate and as completed as much as possible. Does the property have a mountain view or a water view or something that look for any way possible to highlight things about the property that might matter to a buyer? Some buyers will only look at properties if it has a fireplace and your listing has a fireplace, but you didn't check off the box for a fireplace. I'm just picking out some, but these little details, listen, 2 years ago, a lot of this stuff did not matter. You could literally screw up just about all of this stuff. And it was such a seller's market. It didn't matter. That's not, for most of us, that is not the case right now. You have got to get better and more dialed in with all of this. Okay. Reverse prospect. If you didn't do that, if you haven't done that on your listing, you should absolutely do that after we're done and figure out a reason to motivate the buyer agent getting your message for them to schedule a showing before the end of the weekend. Figure out some reason or incentive for them. Feedback. Okay. Chasing down that feedback. I said this already, but I'm going to double back on it. If it's not selling and you had showings, you have to get to the real answer from those agents why their client is not interested, and then present those in a way that is tactful but truthful. Okay. Because listen, what's the worst that could happen if you have a stale listing? What is the worst thing that is going to happen? What? You don't sell it. So if that's the worst case, who cares? If you try and do everything else possible to get it sold, right? That's your job, right? So walk on eggshells around, like, just be truthful. Be truthful. It doesn't mean you have to be abrasive, right? You can be tactful about it, but tell them the truth. This is the feedback. And I'll say this. So this one here, I was sharing the feedback in showing time. When the feedback comes in, you can share it with the homeowner. And I was sharing, and he said, "You're depressing me. Don't share the feedback with me." So I stopped sharing it that way because there were some agents that were being very negative. Okay. And all they were doing, they were sharing their client's response. But again, it could have been more tactful. So I stopped sharing it in that fashion, but it doesn't mean I wasn't still sharing the feedback. I was just finding ways to communicate it a little bit more tactfully. Okay. Couple other points here, and then I want to open it up. Tirelessly explore all options, cash offers, and more. So I'm going to double back on something on this listing here. The one that I mentioned that I still have, the only one that I have that's active currently that we don't have under agreement, this one here. I've been doing everything I can to uncover options. And for whatever reason, she just, like, I presented, I'll tie this in here. For those of you who don't know iList. So this is her property, and this is her offer dashboard. And so I have now submitted for final numbers, both of these. Now, I don't know why she didn't want these before, but she didn't want me to do that before. Because quite honestly, like, knowing what she needs to net, I think these are great options. The problem is, once we get the final, these are going to be slashed a little bit. Like, she's not going to get this net here, because this is assuming the property is in prime condition, and it's not. It needs a roof. It needs completely cleaned out. It needs some other updates and upgrades. Nothing else that would be like major, but it's going to need 10 to 15,000 for it to bring top dollar. But the bigger picture is, whether you're using iList or you're with EXP and you have express offers or whatever the case may be, just tirelessly explore all options with them. Here's one, for example. Do they have a mortgage that is assumable? Would it make sense to have a conversation with them about that? Hey, you've got an assumable mortgage. What if we try this? What if we offer it with the assumable financing and blah, 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 right? We put together a little marketing campaign this week to see if that jump starts some interest or creates some opportunities, right? So just exploring every possible solution and option. And that might mean coming to something like this or posting in Facebook groups or whatever for differing views to brainstorm with other agents who are actively listing and selling. So I'm going to pivot to Q&A. Before I do, I don't ever do stuff like this on these sessions. I do reference tools that I'm using, and I will tell you about a free trial, this, that, or the other thing. But I'm doing something that I'm really excited about. And so I'm going to make you an offer for those of you interested. I'm not going to do some long pitch. I'm going to let you know where you can get more information, what you would get, and how it's going to work. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So I'm doing something starting in the second week of July that I'm calling the 5 weeks to 5 listings Summer Listing Challenge 2025. And the whole idea is that we're going to get together twice a week, and we're going to do the work necessary to get appointments and ultimately listings for 5 weeks straight. And the challenge piece of this is that we're going to give away awards and prizes to those who actually decide to join us and who do the work and take action. And for a few of them that get results, but it's more about doing the work, showing up, doing the work, and winning the day, and doing that again and again. So the challenge is, there is an investment, and there's several reasons why I'm including this investment. A big one is, when you invest your own money, you immediately become more accountable. That's number one. But the investment is a one-time fee of $500. It's a 5-week challenge. We'll get together twice a week, once on Mondays, once on Thursdays. Mondays is here's what we're doing this week. Thursdays is what worked, what didn't, share wins, get help, etc., etc. And the goal is to help agents book 5 listing appointments and take 5 listings in 5 weeks using proven strategy, scripts, and systems, consistent accountability, and live coaching. Prizes. We're giving away prizes. In fact, we have, I don't know, I think I have in here the total amount. I have almost $7,000 in prizes for folks that participate. So prize 1 is the fastest to 5 appointments. Okay. And you have to be able to document the appointments, at least that the appointment was set. Okay. Fastest to 5 listings, and something I'm calling the Hustler Award. I'll come up with some better name for that. But the agent who puts in the most consistent effort shows up and follows the plan. Those winners will get a full refund of their investment. They'll just get their $500 back. I'll literally just go into Stripe and refund them. Okay. However, we're going to give away a whole bunch of other prizes, including we've got sponsorships from PropStream. So we've got 3 annual subscriptions for PropStream. Listings to Leads, we have 3 3-month subscriptions. Thanks.io, 1 6-month business account. And then for the iList platform, my enterprise iList platform, which is fastcashoffers.ai, 3 6-month subscriptions. The total prize dollars, I thought we had this in here, but it's just under $7,000. You can read all of this, you can enroll, etc. If you want to chat with me before enrolling, or this is really important, if someone invited you here and you want to explore with them any scholarship opportunity or how we might even get you in for free, get back to whoever invited you and just schedule a time for a quick chat with them. The document, I'll put this doc in the chat, but you should also, if you go to 5 listings, the number 5, 5listings.com, it should bring that up for you. And oh, by the way, for those that enroll today, I am doing a live bonus session tomorrow just for people who are enrolling in the challenge on the cash offer and motivated seller pay per lead platforms that I'm using and how I'm converting those into listing appointments. So I'll show you the 4 that I'm using right now to get me motivated sellers, and then exactly how I'm following up with them, both from an automated perspective, a manual perspective, emails, text, direct mail, etc. And then how I'm converting them from, hey, I wanted a cash offer, to let's look at this other option because I think we can better get the result that you're looking for. That bonus session is at noon tomorrow, noon Eastern tomorrow. And if you enroll after the fact or you can't make it, it'll be recorded. You'll have lifetime access to that. And I dare say that session alone will probably at least be worth the $500 enrollment because it'll save you a bunch of time, energy, and money and get you exactly what's working for me right now. All that said, no more selling or pitching. You can go to 5listings.com, the number 5listings.com to check out the doc and get enrolled. But let's move now to Q&A and feedback, etc. Let's see here. So it was about half and half between those of you that have stale listings or stalled listings and those that don't, maybe a little bit more on the yes side. Shay, thanks for sharing. This is a great recommendation. Okay. Shay says, this is really good. I suggest getting a reduction signed up front for 10 days after the listing goes live if you don't have 10 showings or 1 bona fide offer. That's pretty good. And if you don't have the guts right now to get that signed up front, at least plant that seed up front so that it's not a shock to your client when you do bring it up. If you don't get, and I love Shay, it's not just that, hey, we're agreeing up front that we're going to reduce. If we're agreeing up front that we're going to reduce if we don't hit these benchmarks. I really like that. And I think that's a great alternative to, I've heard for years people say, get them to agree up front to, especially if you're taking an overpriced listing, quote unquote, get them to agree up front that, hey, we're going to reduce X amount every 7 days until we get whatever, but having those metrics in there. Reynaldo, what do you mean by telling a story, telling the story, or telling a story? I don't know. Every house has a story, right? Or every house has, for the buyer, there's a story they're telling themselves about the house. this is where we'll have our morning coffee, or this is where we're going to have our firstborn live, or whatever. I know that's a little like ethereal. I don't know if I'm using that word right. But what I see very often is not only are agents not telling a story, but they're literally like, the 5 images are like 3 different angles of the front and 2 different angles of the back of the house. And I know that might be an extreme example, but I just don't think that the majority of agents, and this is from my own personal experience in looking at listings, are using that digital real estate to paint a picture of the most interesting pieces of the house, or the coolest parts of the house. So it might be, I don't know, if there's a view of the mountains. Like for me, I've got a view of the mountains. I don't ever think about that. I take it for granted. But if we were to sell this house, I would absolutely have one of those pictures be the view of the mountains that we have, because that may be critically important to a buyer. Reynaldo, I saw you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes. Would you also use box brownie versus AI with putting like staging like you did in
No.
the backyard and stuff?
I don't. I know there might be data that says that you should or could. And quite honestly, like, my market is not as technology forward, and we're a lot more conservative. But I do know that there are lots of people that do that. Here's my take on it. At least in my market, enhanced images like that, and even some that just where they're using like a fisheye lens, etc. Here's what I don't want. A buyer, if I'm taking a buyer to a showing, or they're coming to my property, is them to feel like it's bait and switch. This is not the property that I saw online. That's what you don't want to happen, because it's immediate no. It becomes very hard to overcome that. And I just think that for most houses, you don't need to do that to paint it in the correct light to get them engaged enough, etc. That's one person's opinion, and that's not based on data. That's based upon my own local experience and what I feel like. I just have been on so many buyer appointments where buyers are like, this is not the same house as the pictures. And you go back and you look at the pictures and you're like, oh yeah, I can see what they mean, because they were altered, or they're all like on your iPhone. If you switch to the 0.5 view, that's like the fisheye view, it makes every room look bigger than it actually is. And so, yeah, you can do that to manipulate and get eyeballs, etc. But here's what you want: offers. And if someone comes into your listing and immediately feels like, this is bait and switch, this is not, it looks great here, it is not the place we're walking into, I just think that does more harm than good.
Yeah. One more last question,
Sure.
Mr. Charlie. Yes. And in reference of the incentive that the seller is providing the buyer, would that mean also that part of that money is to pay the fee of the buyer's agent, and not only for the buyer just to use it for repairs or renovate some things?
You're talking about the 11,500 that I had as an example in there?
Yes, sir.
That's direct to the buyer. That has nothing to do with any buyer agency commission that we might or might not have been paying on that listing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
At least that's how we structured it. Right? Now, I'm not even going to say this.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You got
I'm trying to answer this appropriately. So when I said send out an email, a reverse prospecting email to all the clients, you might find the motivation might be, it might be enough for you to say that there is buyer agent compensation being offered by the seller, because you're sending that one-to-one to an agent.
Correct.
I'm not going to say whether it's legal or whatever to say what amount it is or anything, but let's face it, at least, especially, I'll say this, I can tell when it's a less experienced agent who's reaching out to me on a listing, wondering about the compensation because of the way they like tiptoe around it. But it is a question that I'm getting a lot. Is your seller offering buyer agent compensation? And
Right.
so you're just saving a question for that. And we can't do that in the MLS anymore.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see here. Joanne, this is a great question. Do a lot of the strategies in the challenge require an existing database? Joanne is talking about the 5 weeks to 5 listings summer challenge. And that is a wonderful question. If you have an existing database, we will absolutely be talking about and demonstrating what you should do with those. And also, I'm going to take the position that Everyone participating has nothing other than their phone and maybe a laptop. Okay, a phone and a laptop or some computer. In other words, that's the starting place. And yes, there will be resources that I'm going to reference and recommend, etc. And also, I will give you a plan that you can implement with no additional cost other than your phone and your laptop or desktop. And the idea being to lead with revenue such that you either have the confidence and or the dollars to then invest into more data, more tools, etc., if you want to scale up from that point. But absolutely, a part of each week's action plan will be geared towards completely free strategies to implement. And also, if you have a big database, we'll take it. It'll be like a grading scale of here's what to do if you have no budget, here's what to do if you have medium budget, or resources or existing assets, and here up from the top. The seed I plant in the listing agreement is that if you get no showings, you are at least 10% too high. If you're getting showings, but no offers, you're 5 to 10% too high. Then if one of those happens, it's easy to come back to the discussion and adjust price accordingly. Yeah. I think, look, how you implement these strategies is less important of at least proactively having those conversations so that it's not a shock, so that they don't feel like it's bait and switch. When you do come to them and say, oh, you know what? It's been 2 weeks. We've got no showings. You're probably at least 10 to 15% over where we should be. And then they're like, this is news to us. So as proactive you can be to plant those seeds as possible, I think it's well worth your while. It's always better to underpromise and overdeliver, right? You've heard that for years and years and years. It's the same thing you're doing. And Tom corrected himself, the listing appointment, right? So he's planting that seed in the appointment, not in the agreement itself, the listing itself. Ron agrees on the AI staging. I used AI staging and then buyers got to the home. They were disappointed, went back to true staging, even though much more expensive. ROI is still good. I've never used professional staging on a listing. I don't know how many I've sold over the years, but I've never used it. I'm not suggesting that's good, bad, or anything. I've never used it. Kim says, I love Box Brownie for enhancing photos in a natural way, lighten the shadows. The photos are the best I can make, but the house still looks better in person. They draw floor plans. Yeah, I use a professional photography company locally here. And I use them for a number of reasons. Number one, I feel like they show the house in the best light without embellishing it to the point where it feels like bait and switch. And they also do all the other stuff. They do the drone and they do floor plans, etc. So finding a good solution for you, I just think you need to be careful that you're not, what I don't think you want is the feeling of the buyer gets to the home and they're like, this isn't even the same. This is not the place we saw on Zillow or realtor.com or homes.com or whatever. Question on number of pics to post. What do you mean, Jim? Feel free to open your line.
Hey, Josh, thanks.
Yeah.
I've got a Lux, really amazing property about to go live tomorrow. I have over 109 pictures from my photographer. My client is extremely hands-on and wants to post like all of them. What is the max number of pictures that you mentioned homes.com or Zillow? Is that 7 that,
so it's showing more than that. What I'm saying is when you go and pull up a listing, you'll see 5 or 7 without scrolling through more.
That's true. That's right.
And you really want to optimize the pack of photos that they see without scrolling anymore.
Okay, perfect.
As far as how many you can, I think each MLS, I don't know how many you can in Bright. It might be 100.
Even if it's 100, I feel like that's overkill. Do you think that, is there a number that is just way too many pictures to post? I have almost a picture of every corner of that. It's a 10,000 square foot home and they're beautifully done. I've got drone, I've got, you name it. And yeah, I just feel like it's overkill to do more than say 10. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely disagree with the 10.
Okay. What would you say?
I don't know that I'm the best to answer this. Because luxury is not my cup of tea, but I would think a luxury buyer who's investing a lot would also appreciate the fact that there is a lot of information in this case, pictures for them to absorb before investing their time into actually going to the property. And also, I would think that depending on your market, there might be a high likelihood that luxury buyer doesn't live in the market currently. And that would be even more reason that I would want to present as much information as possible. That thinking could be 1000% flawed. That's my immediate thought and reaction.
And that's all I needed. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
perfect. I'm going to go with all 109 pictures.
If you're saying they're beautiful and paint the home in a great light, I
They
can't see any reason that would be a bad thing to have as many
deal.
as possible.
I
Josh,
appreciate
have a
it.
suggestion in this case.
Yeah.
Who's the guy with the 100?
Jim,
When you put your photos into the MLS, try the first 7 in what Josh is saying so that it gets into Homes and Zillow most appropriately and get you the most clicks. But after that, organize, you may be thinking this already, I would organize those photos in first act, second act, third act of the home. So that you're not showing every little detail necessarily all in the first pictures. Try and break it down into sub-stories, to use the term that Josh has already used, and show those. Create some logic to the flow of the pictures.
Absolutely.
help keep
That
people
is something I've done, and that's good feedback,
And
Richard.
through all the pictures, I think.
That's good feedback, Richard. I appreciate that. And that is something that I do to try to place them in an order of almost walking through a virtual tour, like a still virtual tour is the way I try to structure that. So thank you.
yeah, I love that. Larry said, why not send them to another site for more pics? You can potentially do that, but you might not be able to do that in your MLS. And I just feel like there's other more detailed information that you could withhold that might work better anyway. And Kim agrees 100% on the out of area buyers. And she says we set up a single property website MLS version. All right.
Maybe ask AI, what's the opinion of AI trying so many pictures, or would that work too?
You can ask it, but let's face it, the market will tell you the right answer. And I would start with logic, and then I would back it with data. And I think what would be more important, to me, this logic is unassailable, let's say, is that if the most likely, or if one of the most likely buyer avatars for that property doesn't currently live there, you're doing a disservice by not having as much information possible for that out of area buyer to be able to make the decision if they're going to go through the time, energy, and effort to get to town to see the property. James says that less photos can create curiosity, so they're more likely to come see the house rather than rule it out completely. I think that's a potentially logical strategy if it's local buyers, and in particular, if it's lower priced. I don't know that I agree with that on luxury, but again, opinion, not fact or data based. This is just my opinion. I have an appointment that I have to go to for sale by owner. So I'm going to have to come in for a landing and wrap up. The feedback was wonderful. I appreciate that. I'm going to better organize all of this information and data. I will happily share the checklist. This will be compiled into sort of an executive summary. And I hope that I'll see and be able to work more hands-on with many of you in the 5 weeks to 5 listings challenge, which you can get more information and grab a spot at 5listings.com, the number 5listings.com.